Chapter 9. The pond near his house was where Bar Kralar loved to spend most of his days. Since it was the summer, and since it was time to relax before the headmasters soon required him to resume his studies, the young Traxian boy used the time to its fullest, swimming and splashing in the pond, along with his Galimarian friend, Thane. The two had met at school, and soon thereafter it was obvious they were going to be best friends for the rest of their lives. Today was special, since it was right in the middle of the Suspense Age migration, and so it was fun to witness the different colors that the birds gave off when they were flying. Though not obvious while flitting and fluttering around on the ground or tree branches, once the birds took to the air, the iridescent feathers that were underneath the larger but drab outer feathers showed in all their glory, and they were often enough to take your breath away. The whole reason why they had the name Suspense Age was because, as they were taking off from the ground, they would follow a circular pattern while gaining altitude. In doing so, it was a favorite game of Thane and Bar Kralar's to guess the colors that would show once the birds took flight. So far, Bar Kralar was ahead of Thane in correct guesses, but not by much. The two were fairly equal in perceptive abilities. Around lunchtime, Thane's mother, Portia, came to the pond with some favorite morsels of food. As they gobbled up their lunch, she and the boys were treated with the sight of a mother and baby Linar. If this was Earth, they would resemble a white-tailed deer, but with long hair or fur around their neck and head. The babies had no fur whatsoever. Normally, Bar Kralar and Thane would run and play until the sun went down. However, today Portia had Thane come home early. Thane's father wanted to take his family to the home of a work associate this evening, and so Thane had to come home early to get clean and presentable for the evening. All this meant that Bar Kralar ended up coming home early himself. As he entered the front door to his home, he quickly noticed that his father was home as well. It wasn't altogether strange that he would be home at this time of day. It actually happened quite often. Today, though, it sounded like his father was entertaining some associates of his own, and it sounded like there may have been somewhat of a disagreement in the room. He knew he shouldn't eavesdrop on the conversation, but upon hearing his father sounding angry, an event that rarely happened, well, he couldn't help himself. Stepping quietly toward the door, he leaned his back against the wall next to the door and slid down slowly until he finally sat on the floor. It was one of the visitors that Bar Kralar heard first.
"And that is why we can't let this opportunity go by."
"We don't even know if the stupid Grand Council is going to approve the proposal," responded Bar Kralar's father.
"Stupid," thought Bar Kralar as he continued to listen. Why would he call the most esteemed bastion of Galimarian civilization stupid?
It was truly perplexing to him.
"If the prophecy is right, and we know it is, then it can't help but pass. We will finally have the revenge we seek,"
answered a voice that Bar Kralar didn't recognize.
How many people did father have in there?
Wondered Bar Kralar.
"Perhaps," answered Bar Kralar's father. "But we mustn't expect fulfillment of the prophecy until the fulfillment presents itself. It has been a very long time since the prophecy was spoken, and we all know of ones that thought the fulfillment was to happen at a particular time, only to be disappointed. We must take care not to jump ahead of ourselves."
What's all this talk about prophecies?
Wondered Bar Kralar as he continued to eavesdrop.
"Perhaps that was true of them, but tell me,"
retorted another faceless voice in the room. With more than a little measure of venom, he then added, When has there ever been a time when there was the prospect of visiting a world with this same name? We know it was the Grand Council, and not one of us, that named the planet Eden. We know it wasn't Atraxian that gave it the name, since those megalomaniacs on the council won't let Atraxian be in their little club.
Why are they so angry with the Grand Council?
Pondered Bar Kralar, as he worked hard to be as silent as possible.
Aren't they talking about that proposal to send a ship to Eden? Thane and I were even talking about that this morning. I think Thane's friend is the son of the designer of the proposal, Lord Aramin.
Bar Kralar's father responded,
I suppose we'll have to wait and see, won't we, gentlemen? They are supposed to be meeting next week to hear the proposal, and it seems like that proposal is all the people at work want to talk about. With it being so popular, I wouldn't be surprised if it did pass, and if it does pass, we'll have to come up with a plan. I know that the mission is going to be family-based, and it will be open to any that wish to go. We will probably need to use our status as the downtrodden Traxians to get onto the list to go.
Exactly, said one of the voices Bar Kralar had already heard. Meanwhile, we need to keep this under wraps. Agreed? All in the room grunted their agreement. To Bar Kralar, it sounded like the discussion was going to end, and the doors were soon to open. And so, as quietly as possible, he stood and scrambled up the stairs to shower and dress for the evening. As he did, Bar Kralar's thoughts were as far away from his personal appearance as the moon Jenipar was from Galimar. Why was his father meeting with those men? Why did he and the men sound so angry?
Why did they hate the Grand Council? Do they feel that way about other Galimarians? And what is this prophecy they keep talking about?
Finishing his personal grooming, he came downstairs, and by this time he saw that any previous visitors had since vacated. It wasn't lost on his father that his son seemed to come home while he was having his emergency meeting with the members of the Chamber of Traxus, and it may have been possible that his son heard some of what had been discussed. How much? He didn't know. After thinking about it, though, he concluded that his son was getting to the age where it was time that he be told about the real oppression of the Galimarians that Traxian people had to live with for thousands of years. It was time that Bar Kralar be told the truth. Upon seeing his father, Bar Kralar tried to make his face as blank as possible, so as to not give away that he heard anything. But in doing so, that was all Bar Kralar's father needed in order to see that Bar Kralar had probably heard everything.
Hello, Father. You are home early today,
greeted Bar Kralar in an overly somber tone.
Yes, I am. I wanted to have you show me where you and your friends have been spending the summer. It's down by the pond, isn't it?
Yes, right now the spin sages are migrating and they are really amazing to watch.
Bar Kralar's father thought about how he did that same thing when he was young in this very house. A pleasant memory. And a simpler time.
Sounds wonderful. Care to show an old man where that is happening?
You're not old, Father, but sure, follow me.
Bar Kralar didn't need much of an excuse to go outside, and even less to go down to the pond where the spin sages were flying. With no preamble, Bar Kralar jumped up and almost ran out the front door to his favorite spot. In fact, at one point he realized that he needed to look behind to make sure his dad was keeping up. He was. As Bar Kralar said, his father wasn't really that old. Getting to his favorite spot, Bar Kralar sat down on a rock that was almost perfectly shaped like a bench, complete with seat and back. The bench faced a spot that had a perfect view of the place where hundreds of spin sages came to roost. The spot was on the other side of the pond, and so their presence wasn't anything that would spook the birds away. Within a few moments, Barcraylar's father caught up and sat next to his son, while looking across the water at the flock, busying themselves with what was important to an avian mind. Barcraylar sat there watching the birds land and take off again after feeding at the edge of the pond. His body was there with his father, but his mind was far away. It was occupied with what he heard in the hallway when his father was...
Out with it, son.
Huh? What?
Something's on your mind, son. Out with it.
Barcraylar sat there for a while. He hadn't meant to talk about this with his father so soon, and so he hadn't spent time organizing his thoughts. Then again, those thoughts were raw and unfiltered right now, though, and perhaps that was good.
I got home early today, Father, and I heard you and those other men in the study talking.
And you're wondering about the meaning behind what you heard?
Barcraylar paused for a moment.
Yes.
He had been sitting with his back against the rock backrest, but shifting his body forward and leaning his elbows on his knees, Barcraylar's father thought about how to approach this. As he thought about it, he remembered when his own father told him about the history that affected their lives, the secret history of how Galimar had wiped out their people, how revenge was the strong and ever-present undercurrent beneath a well-formed veneer of civility toward the people of Galimar. Yes, the approach his father used worked for him. It'll work for his son, too.
Son, when you go to the beach, do you like to swim in the water?
Of course I do. I love swimming, and that's why I spend so much time here.
Barcraylar paused, then continued.
With my friends.
Do you remember the last time we went there? Remember something called a riptide?
I remember you and Mother saying that I couldn't swim that day because of riptides, but I never understood what that meant.
A riptide is a powerful, narrow channel of fast-moving water that can move faster than the best swimmer. It drags you away from the shore, and if you aren't an experienced swimmer, it can easily mean you'll drown because you don't know what to do.
Wow.
Do you remember what the water looked like that day?
Not really. It just looked like ocean.
Exactly my point, son. To those that aren't experienced in life, sometimes what you see isn't what is really there.
But what does that have to do with what you and those men were talking about in the study?
It has everything to do with what we were talking about. When you look at Galimarian people, they may seem like peaceful people, but underneath a facade of peace, there is an arrogant heart that will stop at nothing to eradicate those that threaten them.
Looking at his father askance, Barcraylar responded,
I have a hard time believing that, Father. My best friend is Galimarian.
And I'm sure he's just fine, for now. But you need to know about something that happened a long time ago. Something that happened to our home planet.
I already know about that, Dad. I know that the planet blew itself up, and that's why we can't go back there.
Yes, but did you know that it was done with technology that was supplied by Galimar?
It was?
Yes. And did you know that the whole reason why they won't share technology with other races is because they said that Traxians are too mentally inferior to handle it?
Mentally inferior?
Yep, it's in their law, son. They may act like you are their friend, but under the surface of the water, they are laughing at you, son. They may act like you're an equal, but don't kid yourself. If we were equals, then why aren't we also on the Grand Council too? I'll tell you why. It's because we are outcasts, inferior people that can't handle their superior thinking.
Bar Kralar's father showed his contempt. Thinking for a moment, Bar Kralar then asked,
"What's all this about some prophecy?"
That, my boy,
answered Bar Kralar's father ceremoniously,
is what holds us as a people together and gives us hope for the future.
How's that?
Have you ever heard about something called the Heart of Galimar?
No.
No, I suppose you haven't. Figures that they haven't taught you about it.
What is it? What is the Heart of Galimar?
Remember the name of the city where the Grand Council meets and where all the rest of the government agencies are located?
Yeah, we studied about that in school 2 years ago. It's called Kytherion.
Correct. Did they tell you about the circular building that is in the middle of the city center?
No. I remember seeing it on a map, but when someone asked about it in class, they said that the answer to that question would come when they are older.
They didn't answer that because you were there.
What? Why?
It's because of something that happened shortly after our world was destroyed.
What happened?
Well, shortly after our world was destroyed, our people figured out the real agenda of the Galimarians and how they were the real architects of the destruction of our world. They figured out that the real reason why the Galimarians were so advanced with their precious technology is because of the Heart of Galimar.
But what is it?
Have you noticed that all Galimarians wear this amulet around their necks and over their chest?
Yes.
The Heart of Galimar is a device that makes those amulets, son. And as I understand it, when a Galimarian puts on an amulet, their mind is transported in some way. It makes them smart, and with the amulets, they are able to communicate. It's some sort of virtual reality device, and it makes them best friends with each other.
Okay.
Those amulets are the problem, son. The amulets need to be crushed out of existence, and the Heart of Galimar needs to be destroyed.
Why?
Because it's bending their minds, boy. It makes them think they're completely superior to any other race, and it makes them believe that they have to destroy any threat that comes along. Traxxas was a threat to them, and that's why they destroyed it.
How was Traxxas a threat?
It was a threat because we were the first race of intelligent beings that they had ever found. They were threatened because they wanted to be the super race of intelligent beings, and they couldn't have Traxxas competing against them in that department.
But that doesn't make sense, Dad. They have been really nice to me.
That's the ruse, son. They are nice to you until it is time to kill you. That is what happened to 6.5 billion members of our race. That's what would have happened to our ancestors had they not already been on Galimar.
So, you're telling me that they all are in on some plan to dominate the universe?
Actions speak louder than words, boy. Just look at what happened to our planet, and you'll have all the proof you need.
Bar Kralar sat there on the bench for a while, not saying very much. His father knew that this was a lot to take in, and so he let his son process all this new information at his own pace. Bar Kralar stood up and began walking along the beach, and his father followed along while staying silent. Eventually, the boy asked a question.
This still doesn't explain what you were saying about a prophecy.
Bar Kralar's father explained,
A long time ago, the Heart of Galimar wasn't locked away like it is today. No, back then it was open and approachable by anybody who wanted to see it. When our people figured out that the Heart of Galimar was behind the creation of all these amulets, and that it was the source of the real issues with our planet and the Galimarians, one of our people was assigned to get close to the heart and learn its secrets. As the story goes, over time he got closer and closer and almost learned where its vulnerabilities were. Apparently, he got careless and the heart of Galimar figured out what he was planning. When that happened, the heart of Galimar put up an energy shield that has been around it ever since.
Okay.
When that happened, the shield wounded the Traxian that was trying to learn the secrets. The wounds were so severe, he died almost immediately, but not before revealing the prophecy. All he could say before he died was that the heart of Galimar was from the future, and that the secret to destroying it lies with Coral of Eden.
Coral of Eden.
That's right. And what you heard in there today was about how the Grand Council is going to consider next week a proposal to make a flight to a new planet. You know what the name of that planet is?
Nodding his head, he simply answered with the word,
Eden.
Exactly. And if the ship flies to Eden, we plan on going along. Perhaps we can find this coral, neutralize her, and maybe change history. Maybe we won't be the orphans that we are now.
The rest of the time walking was spent in silence, until eventually the two men found themselves walking through the front door to their home. Mother had been home cooking, and so the aromas were simply heavenly. From that day on, Thane and Barcraylar drifted apart. For his part, Thane wondered if he had perhaps said something that offended Barcraylar. Thane's father said that it always seemed to happen with Traxians. At some point in a boy's life, he just seemed to want to only be with his own race, and not with Galimarians. It was as much a mystery to his father as it was to Thane.
Hey, fellow Galimarians, this is Dan Adrian, and I just wanted to say thank you for listening to my book. If you can, please click like down below because it really helps me bring these videos to you and lets me know what you like. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe and click on the bell so that you'll get notified when I release more chapters. If you have any questions about this or any other of my books, or if you want to know more about what it takes to write a novel like this one, please make sure you leave your question in the comments below. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.